Do you want to become a talk show host? Do you have a great idea? Passionate World Talk Radio is currently looking for podcast hosts for our Internet Talk radio station. Please email us at pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com with your name, email address, cell phone number, and podcast topic. In return, you will receive a 3-minute intro on air to a live audience about your podcast. Remember, just email us your name, email address, and your podcast topic, and in return, you will receive a free 3-minute intro on the air. How cool is that? Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain.
This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary healthcare provider. Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal it is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Matson, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. Today I thought that we would have a discussion about kind of coming out of the COVID experience, if we want to call it that, and some of the challenges associated with that. Now, I know not everybody quarantined, and I know I assume that the last year of COVID has affected everybody in some way, but quarantine itself has been something, at least in my lifetime, I haven't had that experience of hunkering down for months on end in one situation. And I found, as I kind of thought about it and think about, things are opening up again, you can go out and you can do this and you can go out and do that, that there's this part of me that is feeling a little resistant to going back to all of that. I've found that I have enjoyed this quiet, slower pace. I've enjoyed doing projects kind of in my own time, in my own way, and I've enjoyed not running from here to there in a constant kind of like, a hamster on a wheel, that things slow down tremendously. And I guess I'm a bit of an introvert in that I like my alone time. I discovered my true introvert personality in that I'm really perfectly fine not running around and going a lot of places, and that I can make contact with people on Zoom and not feeling a tremendous, need to be back in groups and in the public forum. And so, and I've gotten hints of that from other friends of mine or some people that I've talked to. I had an email from a friend of mine a couple months ago who said, I'm just exhausted. I spent the day around people and I need to just be quiet. And I kind of laughed to myself because I thought, yeah, I get that. It's like, I remember at Christmas time, my girls were over for Christmas, and I found myself like just wandering away and doing things, and then I'd have to remind myself, the girls are here, go back. And I think what had happened for me was that I was just kind of used to being on my own, and if I needed to go some other part of the house, I just went, and I forgot how to be social. I forgot how to be aware that there were other people around besides my husband and my dogs. So today we've got Victoria with us, who's a licensed professional counselor, and she's been seeing patients through the internet since COVID, and I thought that maybe she could lend some insight into what and how do we reemerge out of our shells back into the real world. So Victoria, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Marianne. I'm very excited to share information.
So what have you found with the patients that you've that you're counseling? Are you finding this, or is this just my issue?
No, I believe it's a little more common than just an individual issue. I think that as a society overall, we had to, like you said, hunker down, during the quarantine. And we went from such a fast-paced, go to work, go home, get your stuff done, get your children to their projects, go, to where we're like, after the quarantine started, what do we do? And so, Marianne, I found exactly a lot of times, and I've encouraged many people to do the same thing, to do exactly what you did. That's why I'm like, yay, because that's what we need. Yeah, that's exactly what we needed to do. Number one, stop the resistance, because it was what we needed to do at the time, but to be able to mentally handle it. But that's what we needed. We needed to do projects. We needed to find our own self and what brings us pleasure outside of, the run-of-the-mill. Like you said, a hamster on the wheel. Well, that's something I have found quite frequently since overall the states are opening up, is there's a lot of thoughts going on. A lot of, oh my goodness, now I've adjusted to this. Now I have to readjust back to opening myself up to the vulnerability too, and the fact that I've had a pretty peaceful last year overall. So there's a lot to factor in. And Marianne, I think you hit the nail on the head, that this is something that really needs to be communicated and discussed.
So do you think that, like this was like a divine intervention for society to say, hey, wake up and figure out what's important, or is this just as a group, do we need to be talking more to each other about how difficult it is to reemerge back into society?
I do believe those need to be conversations, intermixing of groups too, because along with those thoughts of reopening society, we're reopening ourselves to vulnerabilities that we haven't had to in the last year as well. To some of those automatic negative thoughts that we get. Oh, goodness, So the hamster wheel starts going as our thoughts start going, and we got to keep ourselves grounded too. Into knowing that we built our inside self up, over the last year, and we need to maintain that.
Well, what if, did everybody kind of just naturally, as the pandemic went on, finally shut off Netflix and stop baking bread and say, what do I have to learn from this experience? Or is it a matter of just reflecting back and say, did I learn anything through this experience? What's your thought on that?
Well, if they're in treatment with me, we're going to be as in the moment as we can be. And if they have a difficult time with being in the moment, and through mindfulness, that's one of the great coping tools we can use to be aware of. In this moment, we're used to being freedom, come and do. We have that moment now where we do have the freedom to come and do, and we're hesitant. So resiliency is one thing that everybody really needs to pat themselves on the back for, but also have coping skills. How do we open ourselves back up again and maintaining what we have?
So talk to me about what is resiliency.
Well, there's a lot of resiliency, but I discuss a lot about emotional resiliency. Being able to enter into the quarantine. Here we've got all these communications about germs when everybody's been told for years, oh, my goodness, that's OCD, that's this, that's that. But emotional resiliency is to being able to identify that, there's this difficult time going on, and how am I emotionally going to maintain it? And through the last year of the quarantine, I would hope a lot of people turned off the Netflix. I hope that they found, their internal creative parts to come up with projects and ideals. I'd say it'd been a very lonely year if they relied on TV. But like you were talking earlier, you found that you valued your quiet time, your alone time, being able to probably focus a little more, and not everybody is able to find like you did. So emotional resiliency is to know that we've went through these emotionally difficult times. We are going through emotionally difficult times, and how are we coping through it? So a piece of being emotionally resilient is being able to take and do like you've done within the last year, but being able to know that we have to be open to, could you imagine a society that didn't want to open back up?
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking you. What about the people who don't want to open back up? The people who say, I was kind of doing okay just the way it was. Why do now? Like I know people who are introverts and were thrilled that they didn't have to be invited to parties or things like that they could stay home and do their own thing because, that's what was needed to be done, because it was a struggle for them to have to go out and do stuff. And so now the expectation is, first off, that we're going to go out and we're going to do stuff, and second off, that we're going to be happy about it.
Now, I believe a true introvert would have, and the ones that I've worked with, absolutely, this is right up their alley. But even the introverts that I worked with had a difficult time even in this last year.
Really?
The ones that I'm working with, it's even been a challenge because even they're introverted, you still had to find ways to communicate and be a part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And that made it even harder because, like, let's say someone didn't want to talk on the phone before. Now, wait, their work wanting them to use Zoom. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So a lot of the introverts have had to, in my opinion, make some major adjustments too. So that falls under the emotional resiliency too. And to me, I think that's a choice of living. Are you practicing activities of daily living? Are you healthy? There's introvert Marianne that live very well being detached. There's a lot of people going off the grid right now. So I think that, number one, if they're okay with it, I think that would be the first thing to be able to identify. Mm-hmm. Now, what about your family and the people around you that may not be introverts but want to continue their attachment? Therein lies a bigger challenge for them.
So how do you process that with your patients?
Well, typically, the first thing a lot that I do is cognitive behavioral therapy is my favorite, and with cognitive behavioral therapy, it really maximizes your common sense, and it asks you to kind of challenge some of your beliefs or the meaning. So being able to, let's say, evaluate with someone or work through, is there some thinking errors? Is there some distortions that is clouding your view? We all do them. That's why they're very common. But that's one of the first things I do is in the reality of your statements. Is it actual reality, or is it something that your head is activated? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what if it is something that your head is activated? How do you try to inactivate it, or what's the goal there?
they drive the bus. In other words, the client does. To me, if they're in therapy and they want to change it, then that's the next step we do. We start identifying that thoughts are just thoughts. Thoughts are not emotions. Emotions and thoughts are totally different. And the meaning and the beliefs that you place on different events lead you to your emotional and behavioral consequences. So if somebody wants to change, then that's one of the things we do. We look at, what thoughts do we need to kind of look at first? Like, are these even accurate thoughts? People with social anxiety, they have a lot of automatic negative thoughts that hold them back, even though when I challenge them to be like, well, what's your evidence for this? What supports this thought that, they hold such a belief to? And then if there's some kind of distortion, or it's not like the distortion isn't that their thinking is broken. We all have common distortions. That's why they're called common thinking errors. They're very common way to think, but very inaccurate. They're going to lead you to those destructive behaviors or unhealthy emotions. So
can you give me an example of that?
Example? Oh, goodness. One that I continually work on. Let's say that my granddaughter decides that she's going to leave dishes on the counter, okay? Mm-hmm. And I can go up to her and say, hey, Victoria, you always leave dishes on the counter. Well, first of all, that always thinking is kind of the distortion there. It's absolute thinking. And you're not going to be able to effectively communicate with yourself or anyone else because you left no wiggle room. Does that make sense? If it's always, never, ever, then that means that there's no room for negotiation, which means my granddaughter, first thing, is going to throw up her arms, hands at me, and be like, wait a minute, Mama. Sometimes I put them in the sink. You know what I mean? Bottom line, they don't make it to the dishwasher. But do you see how just little words can, steer us in the arena where there's more possibility of unhealthy, emotions as well as destructive behaviors and communication. So when I work with clients, that's one of the things we first look at is what was the event? What's the belief and meaning about the event? And if it's leading you to those destructive behaviors, such as maybe isolating more, or not wanting to answer the phone, knowing that someone called but been like, I'll call them back, just not today. Those are typically the kind of behaviors that's going to lead you to feeling sadder. So with cognitive behavioral, that's one of the first things we do is address activity. We can change behaviors quicker than we can change a lot of other things. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, so for people who are feeling like, the world is opening up, but I just really don't want to start engaging again, what kinds of thoughts or ideas would you use to help them process that and kind of come to a happy medium? Or is it okay to say, I'm not re-engaging with the world, Zoom me if you want to talk to me? I mean, what's your thought there?
Well, I think we all have the right of self-determination. And as a clinician, I keep that kind of in the forefront, self-actualization as well as self-determination that, we all have the right to choose. And if someone wants to be introverted, I don't think they're going to come to therapy. I think I would more have to pull that out of them, because along with the isolation and everything else, some people are perfectly fine with it. And I say if that's the case, if there's no destructive behaviors or anything else like that, now if you're in therapy with me, I'm going to challenge it a little bit. I'm going to have them expand a little bit more on what benefits, could they receive. I have some people that are not really do not want to return to the office. I've seen that a lot.
Oh, tell us more about that.
Well, I have a lot of people who are like renegotiating contracts, they don't want to return to the office full time in the stress of the office, the brick and mortar, especially like a lot of the clients I work with, let's say in Massachusetts area, where they're Boston, where traffic's one of the things that, you know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
They have really, I've had several clients in that area that are just like, I don't want to go back through that. I like the time with my family. We're eating family dinners together. It's not pick up, take out on the way home and let's rush through everything. So I have seen a lot more of like togetherness, more a lot of love and belonging building, and I'm going to support building that too. So if you're one of my clients, that's one of the areas that we look at. And some people have high needs for love and belonging. Other people have low needs for love and belonging. And as long as they're truly happy within themselves, I'm okay with it. That's the key. But if they're not, then I'll encourage mindfulness, being mindful of it. What are some of those thoughts that are hampering you? And how accurate are them? Because you feel it don't mean it's a fact, because you feel the way you think. If that makes sense.
So what if you're in the situation where you're saying, well, I don't want to go back and driving through that traffic, and your employer says, too darn bad. The world is opened back up. The pandemic's over. Get in the car and come to work. How do you reconcile that one?
Well, the first thing I would ask, is the pandemic really over? That's the first thing, is try to find out what the patient believes about the pandemic. And then truly there seems to be like a negotiation dance going on, about the return. I have several that have went to HR and been like, productivity's better, blah, 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 and they've been able to do some negotiating. Now, I've had other people who, they've not had a choice, but then we look at building skills on that again. And a lot of them, maybe we don't need to return to old behaviors. Maybe we need to redefine some new behaviors that will leave them feeling healthier emotions with healthier behaviors. And there's a lot of companies out there willing to do stay-at-home work now, more so than before.
Right.
I believe.
So with that, with the world, opening back up and that expectation of returning, am I hearing you say that it's a choice as to what degree you're willing to return? Do you suggest to people that they look at what their life was, a year and a half ago, before the pandemic, and say, okay, here's what you were doing, you rush, you didn't really feel like you ever stopped until your head hit the pillow, and now things are different. So what's a non-negotiable activity? What are you willing to go back to do, and what are you absolutely willing not to do? Is that part of that process?
Yeah, kind of, assessing both the pros and the cons, and then being able to identify for themselves. Number one, we don't want to be without a job. If that's one of the priorities, is to bring steady income in, we definitely want to stay within the perimeters of that. But I am finding some people are having the luxury of negotiating a little bit. Like, I know some of the offices in Boston are opening up, and more so than we've had like in Tennessee. It's been lax down here. But many of them, the ones that I've worked with and have had the issues, most of their employers have been, okay, we can, kind of negotiate through HR or however it's been. But some's not had that opportunity at all, or that luxury.
But what about not just work? What about commitments to go to movies or go to dinner, or go to whatever? I mean, do you think that people will go back to that overcommitted life?
Oh, gosh. That one's, help me on that one, because I believe it's self-determination. I believe there will be some people. I have several, and I'm a counselor, so of course I'm seeing, the people that are coming to see me obviously want some kind of change in their life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that's where, the change could be, Marianne, that they're so scared to get out there now, because what if they have some of the fears or worries that are driving their anxiety, and now, let's say they haven't had any therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have a shift of that too. The anxiety's rising, just like what you were saying. You become very comfortable. You loved your alone time.
Mm-hmm.
You were perfectly fine with it. But a lot of people, it's hard to say, Marian, because, that self-determination to me is the caveat.
Mm.
I think
so
as long as I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you, so what is the process of reacclimation to, to going back? Do you have a sense of how to do that?
I think that there's been lots of articles, journals, and that's been written on it. But to me, it's kind of like, I take it a little bit like truly a trauma survivor. Trauma has a way of restricting us down to where we don't really think and do like we did before the trauma. It's like a spiral. It really spirals down to where we're so constricted. And I kind of look at that like the COVID, because one of the things as a person starts to heal, they start allowing more into their life, and then the spiral gets bigger. We allow more opportunities and challenges. So I believe that the person has to determine that pathway, Marianne, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and on their comfort. And I don't, in my private practice, I don't push. It's what the client wants to do. Now, how can we get there? We're going to make a plan together, but they obviously have to do the different work. And for me, a lot of times, it's in knowing what you think and what areas are you willing to put change into. Like, for instance, somebody that's maybe isolated to the house for so long, I would encourage them, do you think today you can walk to your mailbox and get your mail? You know what I'm saying? I would, what is it? And then, I use a lot of CBT, so desensitizing is something that we've worked on as well.
So what I hear you saying is that this reacclimation process is really one where you take beginning steps and sort of start to move back into that social world. But
exactly.
But you can also choose how much of that you're going to do. Like, let's say you belong to 3 book clubs before and was in charge of the bake sale and, did something else or whatever. You can choose to not do all of that and to use your energies to do other things that you maybe discovered during the pandemic.
That's correct. Now, Marianne, let's preference all this by saying there's a difference between someone being introverted and choosing to live a lifestyle. Maybe they want to live off the grid. Hey, that's great. However you want to live. But somebody that's not a true introvert, living like an introvert, there's definitely could be maybe the possibility of some depression and anxiety mixed in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
And if there is...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, if there's a lot of us professionals that, with telehealth, they don't have to leave the house. And we can give them the help, have the communication. Ultimately it's going to be their decision whether they do it or not.
So can you tell our listeners how telehealth works? What's that all about?
Yeah, telehealth is exactly, not exactly. Let me take that back. And this is in my opinion. telehealth is where you get the same service in a roundabout way as you would by going into a clinician's office. There's some different perimeters, of course, with different safety awareness that you have to be. Telehealth, to me, is not something you would want to do like level 2, 3, or 4s. You know, you would want to keep telehealth. There's some people who are doing EMDR on telehealth. There's all kinds of services.
All of those terms that you just said, I don't know what they are. So what do you mean by 2, 3, and 4s and EMD?
Okay, I'm so sorry. Levels of treatment. I'm so sorry. Levels of treatment. If somebody is having some suicidal thoughts, Marianne, in my opinion, telehealth, or more so suicidal, but actually like has a plan and intent, telehealth to me isn't as appropriate as it would be for face-to-face, even though we take a lot of the same precautions. That's what I meant. And eye movement desensitization or reprocessing is a psychotherapy of, it's a psychotherapy of helping people heal trauma. So as we do it, I've been doing telehealth probably about 3 years now before the pandemic started. And we're finding it a lot more like your rural areas where maybe they don't have the transportation. Maybe they can't get in to see a clinician. They're able to do it by video and be able to stay in the comfort of your home and receive some of the same services as if it would be in person. Now, I teach a lot of holistic approaches to therapy, and I have found ways to do that online, like teaching people progressive muscle relaxation, diaphragmatic breathing, mindfulness, learning how do we coach, learning. There's just a lot of different modalities that you can look with telehealth. I think it's a great avenue. I don't think it's for everybody, but I think it's definitely a good approach.
So how do people find a telehealth clinician, and what is it that they would be looking for?
There's a specific website that I would encourage everybody to go to, and am I allowed to say it?
Sure.
Psychology Today. That's one of the better websites that I've seen, because you put your zip code, you put your insurance, if you don't have insurance, what treatment modality would you like, what you know what I'm saying? If there's in person, they advertise it. Telehealth, they advertise it. So that's a really good one-stop place to get, even if you want to see like somebody for medication management. There's psychiatrists on there. There's psychologists, testing. It's a good one-stop shop.
Okay.
And always they can contact their insurance company if they have insurance and talk to them and tell them, I'm interested in telehealth. They can go online. There's a lot of telehealth companies currently.
And so the thing is, I think for many people is that idea of going online, and how do you know if they're quote unquote good company or if there's somebody who might take advantage of you. So your experience, and you work with the Psychology Today website, right?
Okay. Well, I think that as any clinician, whether it's psychotherapy, however it is, they still have ethics to go on. There's laws and there's ethics that govern everything we do, too. So, to me, most of us clinicians would practice under that.
All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll include that website in the blog and make sure that we give you Victoria's name in case you want to look her up in this. These therapists are licensed in certain states. Not every. I don't know if there's anybody who's licensed in all 50 states. And so depending on where you live, depends on, if people have gone through that licensing procedure. So any last thoughts, Victoria, before we wrap up?
I just, number one, as always, if there's anyone with suicide thoughts, please, there's lots of us out here. Reach out, and communicate with somebody about it. And we can get through this. As a society, we're very resilient, and we're not alone in this. If you feel you're alone, we're out here. Reach out to us.
Well, and that is comforting. And also for people to know, our listeners to know, that they're not alone in their feelings of how they're going to, emerge or reemerge from their isolation and, re-enter into the world. So our guest today was Victoria Bentley, who's a licensed professional counselor, and you can check our blog to find information about how to contact her on the website. And thank you to Victoria. You are wonderful as always. It's always such a pleasure to have you on our show.
Oh, thank you, Marianne. I always really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk and share with you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to all of you for spending time with us during this show, Everyone Dies. You can read our blogs and listen to our other podcasts at everyonedies.org. Thank you to our producer, Jeannie White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss on the show, just email me, Marianne at everyonedies.org. That's MARIANNE at EVERY, the number 1, DIES.org. I hope that you live your best life every day. And remember, every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.
Do you want to become a talk show host? Do you have a great idea? Passionate World Talk Radio is currently looking for podcast hosts for our Internet Talk radio station. Please email us at pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com with your name, email address, cell phone number, and podcast topic. In return, you will receive a 3-minute intro on air to a live audience about your podcast. Remember, just email us your name, email address, and your podcast topic, and in return, you will receive a free 3-minute intro on the air. How cool is that? Thank you for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You can listen to this program all over again by going over to https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. You can also hear it on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Alexa, AMFM247.com every Tuesday evening between 8 and 9 p.m. YouTube, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, and all the other podcast directories one can find on the Internet.